I can't take it anymore. Please, let's get a divorce. I managed to squeeze out those words. My husband looked down on me and sneered back. Finally, huh? Took you long enough. His statement was joined by the in-laws chiming in. Just get lost, ugly wife. But they don't know yet. They don't know that divorcing me will be their painful mistake. My name is Susan, a 49-year-old homemaker. I have been married to Richard for 20 years. Sometimes people ask how we are going to celebrate such a long marriage. But to me, it feels like I've just endured it for 20 years without realizing. Of course, there's no celebration, and I don't want one either. So when asked by my friends, I just force a smile and say, what should I do, I wonder? I met my husband at a mixer. He was a salesperson working for a fairly well-known company. And he was the type to initiate communication actively. And at the mixer, he was the center of attention, popular among the women. But as seats were being switched around, he ended up sitting next to me. How's it? Are you having fun? Huh? Oh, yes. Sort of. Just sort of, huh? Well, let's make sure you end up having fun today. Let's talk. I have a special ability to make anyone laugh. You have such an ability? That's very convenient. Yeah. So I totally exploit it in sales. Exploit? I make people laugh, they start liking me, and that's a win. Well, as a middle-aged man, I'm not thrilled when other middle-aged guys like me. But it's important for my work. He said that, laughing, which also made me laugh. You're very honest, aren't you? That's my selling point. Expose myself honestly without any consideration. Then people become tolerant and open up to me. And when they open up, their threshold for laughter lowers. So it takes just a little joke to make them laugh. And if they have fun with me, that's a win. The next time I go to a sales meeting, they'll talk eagerly, and I just listen. Then they feel accepted. And that's when you build a trusting relationship and snag the contract. That's amazing. You're a real charmer, it's like the term was made for you, Richard. Susan, you're funny. I tried to make you laugh, and you made me laugh instead. Oh, really? Am I funny? Yeah. Definitely, but in a good way. Susan, talking with you is really fun. I remember feeling happy to hear that. Having been dedicated to my work and rarely speaking privately with men, I wasn't sure how to engage in conversation with them. I had dated before, but the dates never went well, and I always felt an awkward atmosphere. Perhaps it wasn't entirely my fault, but I suspected I might be part of the problem, as I don't have many friends. Since then, I had become shy about love and buried myself in work as if running from romance. So his words made me very happy. Before I knew it, I was drawn to him. And so we exchanged contact information and started meeting just the two of us. After a few dates, he confessed his feelings, which I accepted. He was very gentlemanly and caring, cherishing me deeply. Despite his busy schedule, he made time for me and planned our dates. The time I spent with him was always fun, and I think I was always laughing. Then I got pregnant, which led us to decide to get married. When I told him about the pregnancy, he said, I'm sorry things are out of order, but I want to marry you, Susan. Later, he prepared a ring and gave it to me as a present. I was very happy that our marriage was decided. And I was thrilled that we were going to have a baby together. That was probably the happiest time for me. We then visited each other's parents to introduce ourselves. My parents were surprised at the pregnancy, but understood when we explained that we had already considered marriage. And they were delighted about having a grandchild. Later, we visited his parents as well. The in-laws, on the other hand, were eager to know whether it was a boy or a girl. Richard had to calm them down, saying it was still too early to know the gender. But they were obviously happy to be able to see their grandchild's face. I thought it was good that his parents seemed like they would value family. After the meeting of both families, we had our wedding. And Richard and I became husband and wife. I was working at the beginning of our marriage. But as my pregnancy progressed and my health declined, I took maternity leave. I prepared for the birth with my mother's help. A few months later, I safely gave birth to a healthy baby boy. Our son was so adorable, and everyone celebrated his arrival. Oh, a boy. Well done. He's so cute. Thanks, Susan.
Yeah.
I was bothered by my father-in-law's well done, but it was good to see the in-laws happy. My husband and I named our son Aaron. The baby was truly adorable, but parenting was still challenging. I took maternity leave to focus on raising him, but the days were still hectic. No matter how much I soothed him, he would often start crying again. And his night cries were terrible. If I wasn't careful, he seemed ready to crawl off somewhere when I least expected. And I always had to be vigilant. Even going to the supermarket was a struggle. And while taking great care of Aaron, I also had to manage the household chores. Which was quite tough. Dinner's not ready yet? Oh, sorry, it took a while to put Aaron to bed. I see. My husband seemed like he wanted to say more but didn't. However, a little later when a similar situation occurred, he said, "Susan, why don't you quit your job and stay home?" What? Why? Because you're already struggling to balance childcare and housework. It'll be even harder if you work. I want to eat dinner right when I get home and have a bath ready immediately. So, it's better if you just quit your job. I was shocked by my husband's words. Doesn't he want to help with the housework or childcare at all? Doesn't he care about what I think? Isn't he even going to ask what I want? Does that mean I'll always be the one doing the housework and childcare? Who else is going to do it? You can't rely too much on my mother, right? This is our marriage, after all. That was the first time I felt some mistrust towards my husband. It seemed he had no intention of taking on any of these responsibilities himself. Well, since he had never done any housework, it would probably take more time and effort if I left it to him. Maybe it would be easier for me in the long run to focus on housework and childcare. That was the only way I could think positively about it. After that, I dedicated myself to childcare and housework. I read lots of recipe books and even studied nutrition. So the lunches I packed for my husband, and the dinners we ate together, were all nutritious. I also made sure to spend a lot of time interacting with my son. Thanks to that, we had some intense and memorable times together. Every time my son achieved something new, I would take tons of photos and videos with my smartphone, filling up the camera folder. Aaron grew up healthy and well-behaved. Around the age of 3, he started talking more, and I enjoyed chatting with him. Every day, seeing him absorb new things and make discoveries was a joy for me. I took him to parks, zoos, and many other places to increase his exposure to different sights and experiences. Aaron was growing up well, but the problem for me was my husband. Even though I wanted to go out as a family of 3, my husband would say he was too tired from work and that it was bothersome. I couldn't believe it. For a young child, going out with the family is a very happy experience. Surely Aaron would want to play more with his father. It is just wrong for him to say it's bothersome because he's tired. I wished he would act more like a father. During the week, he would come home late at night, and on weekends, he would just laze around at home. Because my husband was always like that, Aaron didn't initially recognize him as his father. Realizing this was bad, I asked my husband to be more father-like. But he didn't listen at all, and later, he took a surprising action. That was to invite his parents over on the weekends. He found it too bothersome to handle himself, so he threw everything onto his parents. All right, we'll play with our grandson. Let's go to the aquarium right away. Susan, please drive us. Okay. No sooner had the in-laws arrived than they were ready to whisk my son off to the aquarium like it was a kidnapping. I hurriedly got ready and went to the aquarium with Aaron and the in-laws. But it goes without saying that I couldn't enjoy it at all. Is that all there is to it? Look, Aaron, there's a big shrimp. No good, he's not looking at all. Look, Susan, it's your turn to take care of him now. What? They had insisted on going to the aquarium and took Aaron with them. But then they just gave up halfway through. Susan, I'm thirsty. Me too. Go buy us some beer. They sell it at the shop. What? Alcohol? What's the problem? Do you have a complaint? Exactly, how dare you defy your in-laws as a daughter-in-law? They said this as they glared at me sternly. It would be much better if I just went out with my son alone. They are just like having extra kids with all their demands. They continued to trouble me by saying whatever they wanted. Let's go to a restaurant on the way back. Let's do that, I'll make a reservation right away. Susan, you'll take care of the payment. What? The in-laws said this and made a reservation at an expensive place. Reluctantly heading to the restaurant, my husband joined us. My husband and in-laws seemed to enjoy their meal as a family, dumping the responsibility for Aaron on me and having a good time among themselves. I had no chance to even enjoy the meal. Yet, I was the one expected to pay, which was unacceptable. As a homemaker, you're supported by me. So managing the finances from the household budget is only natural, right? Make sure you pay. Although my husband says this, honestly, he doesn't contribute enough money. He hands over $1,000, saying this should be enough. With that, he expects me to manage the living expenses for 2 adults and 1 child. Honestly, it's impossible. Maybe with extreme budgeting, it might be manageable. But with sudden expensive meals out like this, the budget is blown in an instant. Yet he expects me to manage it, which is unreasonable. It's really troublesome having a wife who can't handle things. Richard, you really drew the short straw with you. Poor thing. Hey, don't cause any trouble for my parents. My husband and in-laws treated me like a housekeeper. Every time we met, they treated me terribly. I endured this difficult life all for the sake of my son. I wanted to provide a comfortable life for him, and hoped for him to be happy growing up with both parents. So, even though I was having trouble getting along with my husband and in-laws, I was determined to continue the marriage until my son grew up into a fine adult. And before I knew it, many years had passed. Aaron grew up more splendidly than I had imagined. Aaron is already 20 years old. Despite everything, time has flown by. I'm happy to see how well you've grown up. It's all thanks to you taking good care of me, Mom. Oh, what a sweet thing to say. I'm just telling the truth. Thanks for taking care of everything at home and even sending me to university. I was happy that my son had grown into an adult who could express his gratitude. He is currently a second-year university student, enjoying and managing a busy schedule. He hangs out with friends, works part-time, and diligently studies. Thanks to his energy and enthusiasm, I'm glad I could be with him until he became an adult. I thought I should give myself some credit for that. As for my husband, he remained the same. In fact, it seemed his pride had grown over the years, and his way of speaking had become harsher. The in-laws were the same, seemingly putting even more energy into their selfish behavior. I was just astounded by these hopeless people. But I hadn't given up. I had been waiting for the right moment. For Aaron to become an adult, and for me to become free. Hey, we're going to live with my parents soon. What? Why all of a sudden? It's not sudden. We've decided to renovate the family home. I'm taking out a loan as a way to honor my parents and will make the house nice. I'm taking you with me out of pity. Of course, as a housekeeper. You should be grateful you can live in our house. Lucky for someone so useless. As my husband and in-laws laughed heartily, I knew this was my moment. I calmly handed my husband a paper. What? What is this? It's a divorce petition. A divorce petition? I can't take it anymore. Please, let's get a divorce. I said it as if squeezing the words out. I deliberately acted submissive and looked down. My husband looked down on me and sneered as he replied. Finally, huh? Took you long enough. The in-laws also joined in. It's just right for her to leave by herself. Just get lost, ugly wife, ugly wife. My husband and in-laws were happy that they could drive me out. But they don't know yet. They don't know that divorcing me will be their painful mistake. I packed my bags and moved back to my parents' house. When I discussed it with my son, he told me that as soon as I settled into a new place, he would come live with me. Since he's already an adult, there's no discussion about custody. My husband quickly completed the divorce papers, so the divorce went smoothly. But it wasn't over yet. I knew my husband frequently visited nightclubs and had developed relationships with some people there. So, I sent a certified letter through my lawyer to his workplace demanding property division and child support. Soon after, my ex-husband contacted me. Hey. What are you doing? Because of you, my colleagues are giving me the cold shoulder, making it hard to work. Though, hasn't it always been like that? You've been incompetent for 20 years without any promotion. What? I'm not incompetent. If that were not true, perhaps your salary would have increased by now. Despite your stagnant pay, the need for more money kept growing. And I had to cover all of it. Did you know that? Don't tell a lie. Aren't you just a homemaker? That's right, but I was making investments with the money I saved while I was still working. So, I had quite a lot of assets. Even the tuition for Aaron's high school and university was entirely paid with my money. No way. That can't be true. You don't have to believe me, but how long do you think you and your low-income parents, who are living off a small pension, can manage the renovation loan payments and live decently? It'll be interesting to see how long you last. Wait. With the property division and child support, it's impossible. Giving up already? You really have no backbone, how pathetic. I had no idea you were supporting us. Well, you never showed any interest in me, treating me like a housekeeper. You're just facing the consequences now. Please, forgive me. I'll make my parents apologize too. Such superficial apologies won't make me forgive you. I told you I've reached my limit. You can live however you like from now on. But remember, if you fall behind on the payments, I'll have your wages garnished. Goodbye. And enjoy your descent into hell. Susan. I hung up the phone. Apparently, my ex-husband's wages were being depleted by the loan. And the payments for me, and the repercussions were affecting his parents. However, his parents had thought he was earning a lot. And had been spending recklessly with no savings. As a result, they were leading a very poor life and had even incurred debts. Meanwhile, I started a new life in a rented apartment with my son, which is conveniently close to his university. He can comfortably commute to school. He has promised to repay me when he starts working and is diligently studying to earn his credits. Preparing for job hunting early. Watching my kind-hearted son grow. I will continue preparing nutritious and delicious meals for him every day. My name is Erica, and currently, I live with my parents, just the three of us. I sold my company 2 years ago and now work as an investor, which provides a stable income, so we are not struggling. Some might think it's odd that I'm over 30 and not married yet. But I have things I want to do, and as long as I can make my parents happy, that's enough for me. I think it's okay, even if I stay single for life because I have money. And don't feel the rush that comes from worrying about the future without marriage. Whether that's good or bad, I don't know, but I can live without any hardships. I was thinking of going on a trip this weekend with everyone. What do you think? That sounds wonderful. Actually, this year marks the 30th anniversary of my marriage to your father. So we were thinking of going somewhere. Then it's decided. I have a sister who is 3 years older than me, and our parents have raised us well. I didn't go to university because I had my own pursuits, while my sister attended a private university. Our parents spent a lot on us since they didn't spend much on themselves. So I've always wanted to give back to them as much as possible. Living with my parents also makes it easier to take them out for meals or on trips. And they are happy that I live with them. It would be nice if the whole family could go on a trip next time. Yes. But I wonder if your sister will come. We haven't been in touch at all since then. And I'm worried because I don't even know what she's doing now. You still haven't been able to contact her? No reply, so I don't even know if she's seen the messages. It's been about 3 years now. I live with my parents, but my sister hasn't even contacted us since she moved out. She repeated a year twice in university and financially burdened our parents. From that time, we began to argue daily, gradually ceasing to speak to each other. I moved to New York because I had things I wanted to do. But it seems my sister continued to live at home for several years. However, she got married 3 years ago and moved out without even contacting us. She didn't even greet us for the marriage, did she? Really selfish. Maybe she thinks it doesn't matter because she won't live in this house anymore? Well, I'm glad she's independent. But it's a bit sad as a parent not knowing what kind of life she's leading. Father also says similar things, and I thought they were really lenient. But it's not my place to interfere. Moreover, it seems they are no longer burdened by us. Well, it's okay. My parents seem to want all of us to get along well again in the future. If my parents can live happily, that's good enough. While living such a life, 1 year later. Mom and Dad, get ready to go out. Huh? Do we have plans to go somewhere today? There's something I want to show you. With that, I took my parents to a certain place. It was in a prime location in New York, where luxury houses line the streets. My parents had never been to such a place, so they looked around restlessly. But I stopped in front of a particularly impressive large house. Don't you think this is a really nice house? Yes, but what about this house? I bought it. From now on, the three of us will live here together. My parents were surprised at my words, but I was serious. In fact, I had been dealing with the purchase of the property for half a year, and finally, the preparations for moving were complete. The house I bought has 7 bedrooms and living rooms. Although such a large house isn't necessary, our parents, who had dedicated everything to us since we were children, had always dreamed of living in a large house. You can't be serious. Is this true? Such a mansion. When did this happen? I wanted to see the look on your faces, and I've been working hard for this, so I'm happy. As I said this, my parents covered their open mouths with their hands in joy. Of course, buying things or spending money isn't the only way to honor your parents. but I was happy to fulfill one of their dreams, and I plan to repay them even more. I want their later years to be even happier. I felt good about this. While living this life, 3 years later, I have continued to increase my assets through prudent investments. And today we plan to go out to a restaurant as a family of 3. When it was time for our reservation, I was getting ready to leave the house soon. Suddenly, the house intercom rang. I hadn't ordered a delivery, and I wondered who could be visiting at this time. As I looked at the camera on the intercom. Huh? Sister.
Oh.
You really were living here. Let me in for a bit. I had not been in contact with my sister for years, and I hadn't told her about moving. So, the sudden visit surprised me, but I decided to let her in anyway. It seemed my parents were surprised by my sister's visit too, so it was unlikely they had called her. How did she find out about this house? It's been a while. What brings you here suddenly? Also, I didn't tell you about moving. So how did you know about this house? You moved and didn't invite me, how awful. It feels like I'm the only one left out. Are we even a family? That is. I almost blamed my sister for always doing selfish things and eventually leaving home on her own. But I realized that arguing wouldn't solve anything. My sister has a very short temper, and when she's angry, she might even resort to violence. And I didn't even understand why she came now. So, I tried to avoid any conflict. I reminded myself to be careful not to let any sharp words slip, and for now, I asked the most pressing question on my mind. Who did you hear about this house from? No, we went to the same high school, and your friends are my juniors. That kind of information gets around. Really? While it's true that we went to the same school, I can hardly believe that there's still interaction with people from back then. I hardly interacted with my high school friends myself, and I certainly didn't announce my move. I thought my sister knew I was running a company, and must have researched it herself after learning about my earnings. If she says she heard it from friends, maybe it's better not to pry any further. Well, anyway, after several years, the 4 of us in the family have gathered. So, you used to lecture me about becoming independent. And now you're the one relying on mom and dad? Excuse me? Living in such a nice house, are you even paying any rent? Well, this house is. Am I being allowed to live here? Is she misunderstanding something? She seems to think the house was bought by our parents, but there's no way they could afford that. Especially since my sister went to a private university and even had to repeat years. Does she have any idea how much money our parents spend on her? Is she joking or serious? If she's serious, she's really out of touch. No, I bought this house. You don't have to lie. I heard you're not the company's president anymore? I sold that company, and now I live as an investor. Saying you sold it as if that's going to throw me off, huh? As if you didn't just fail in managing it, that's hilarious. Her condescending attitude hasn't changed even at this age. I thought our parents would be happy to reunite with my sister, but instead, they showed disgust at her brazen words after seeing her for the first time in years. No words were spoken, but their faces were tense, the smiles gone. Well, that's a normal reaction. And the thought that she came here just to say such things makes me feel sick. Then, the words my sister said next left us all stunned. I'll be staying in this house for a while. Oh, and my husband will be with me. What? What is she talking about? Does she think I'll just agree to that after the way she's behaved? Even just now, you approached me with such a domineering attitude. Yet how much more shameless can you get before you're satisfied? I wish you'd stop joking around already. No, just because this house is big doesn't mean that's possible. You left without even a marriage greeting, isn't that too convenient? Is that how you treat family? Besides, I'm pregnant. Unlike someone who won't even marry and show her parents a grandchild. What? Pregnant. Until then, our parents had looked somber, but at the news of my sister's pregnancy, their eyes widened. Indeed, when we sometimes went to department stores, our parents would gaze adoringly at small children. I knew they wanted to see grandchildren since I wasn't married and they were considerate about it. So, no matter how terrible my sister had been until now, her having a grandchild seemed to erase all past issues. Is it true you're pregnant? Doesn't look like her stomach is big yet. I found out just last week, so it doesn't show yet. But I want to come back home soon, so keep in touch. After saying that, my sister left. Truly, her selfishness knows no bounds. After all she has done, doesn't she owe an apology? But, the parents' reaction earlier undoubtedly encouraged my sister's arrogance. Of course, I don't blame them. As someone who isn't married, I can't give them grandchildren. And it's natural for them to be pleased about my sister's pregnancy. But wanting to come back home. Honestly, I don't like it. But what should we do about sister coming home? It's truly wonderful news that she's pregnant. Indeed. Despite all the selfish things she's done, she's going to be a mother. It's quite moving. They didn't touch on her coming home, but they continued to be happy about the pregnancy. That's a normal reaction, nothing odd about it. In their eyes, my sister's pregnancy overshadows the inconvenience she's caused. And her leaving home on her own. I don't want to forgive my sister's selfishness, and I think she should sincerely apologize. But what's most important to me is how our parents feel. About her coming home, what do you two want? I want to support her and welcome her, but if you're against it, I'll firmly say no. Right. We understand your anger at her insincerity. That's a relief. Perhaps I've been comparing myself with my sister somewhere deep inside. Despite all I do for our parents, I feared they might side with her just because she was pregnant. But in the end, they considered me first, and that's enough for me. All right. If we agree she stays only until after the birth and things settle down, that's okay. I would have preferred to set things straight first, but I decided to accept my sister. We asked our parents to reach out to her, and a week later, life with my sister and her husband began. I had never met my sister's husband. And they hadn't greeted me properly even though they started living with us without an introduction. Well, I wasn't really expecting anything, so it doesn't matter much. I thought as a week passed. Hey, why don't you move out and live on your own? What? I don't understand what you mean all of a sudden. Because we need your bedroom as our bedroom and you're in the way. What is she talking about? She's the one who moved into my house, why am I being told to leave? Indeed, there are 7 rooms, but 2 of them are my parents' personal rooms. And one is already being used as their bedroom. 2 more rooms are being used as storage, and the other 2 are my study and bedroom. So, I had given them my bedroom, but that still wasn't enough for them. After all the selfish things you've done, haven't you reflected at all? I'll be left without a room. Does that even matter? You're old enough, just move out. It's embarrassing not to be independent at your age. What? They have no right to say that. They probably don't know that this house is in my name. My sister seems to think that I bankrupted my company and couldn't possibly afford such a house. We hadn't spoken properly even after her husband moved in. And I was too busy with investments to bother explaining. But I can't let them do whatever they want anymore. Like I said before, this is my house, so don't just say whatever you like. There you go again. Living off our parents, what are you even talking about? With that, she and her husband went back to their room. Living in someone else's house. Thinking further won't improve anything. Besides, I was busy with discussions about a new investment. So I didn't have time to deal with my sister and her husband. I quickly got ready and left for a cafe to discuss the investment. After talking for nearly 2 hours and finding a good stopping point, I went home. But the moment I tried to enter the front door, I couldn't believe my eyes. Hey. You're there, aren't you? What? You're so noisy, what is it? Why is my stuff thrown out in the garden? And there's even a tent. What's the meaning of this? It turns out that my important belongings, which had been in my study, were thrown into the garden, and a tent had even been pitched, obviously suggesting that I should leave. It was just as well that our parents weren't home, so there was no one to complain to. But people should not take others for granted. I don't know what you're planning, but stop messing around. You're in the way because there isn't enough room. I've told you many times, if you're an adult, you should move out. People without social norms don't belong in this house. They said this with smug faces. I was so angry I almost lost my composure, but if I lashed out, I'd be the one at fault. I managed to suppress the anger bubbling up inside me and gathered my belongings from the garden. Mom and Dad are on a trip and won't be back until the day after tomorrow. Enjoy camping out. Ignoring their comments, I gathered my belongings and left the house. I headed straight to a hotel and checked in safely. Later, when I checked my phone, I saw that my parents had contacted me. It seems my sister and her husband had given them tickets for the trip. It was all part of their plan to drive me out while our parents were away. But I won't stay silent any longer. After all the disrespectful things they've done, there's no way I can forgive them. I'm determined to make them regret their foolish actions. With that decision made, I immediately called my parents. Sorry for calling at this hour. Are you okay? We should apologize for leaving the house suddenly. The tickets were valid for today, so we hurriedly got ready and went. My parents seemed to be enjoying the unexpected trip, but I was far from relaxed. I didn't want to ruin their trip, but after taking a deep breath, I continued the conversation. Can you look at the photos I just sent you on Messenger? Photos, This is our garden. Illegal dumping. While you two were away, my sister and her husband threw out my belongings without permission. I told them everything that had happened without holding anything back. My parents were silent for a moment, shocked, but that was understandable. To them, my sister is just another family member. They haven't forgotten what she's done so far, but her pregnancy and the gift of the trip. It's like thinking someone is nice just because a delinquent helps an elderly person. A negative image of a person can suddenly change just because they do something good for you once. But facts are facts. I don't intend to forgive my sister. Of course, she's pregnant and you probably don't want to make a big deal out of it, but I just can't. For now, we'll talk about it when we get back. Where are you now? I was so annoyed I went to a hotel. Understood. We'll contact you again. It wasn't clear whether my parents were on my side or my sister's. But for now, I would wait to see what actions they would take. Depending on what they do, I'll think about what to do next. With those thoughts, I stayed at the hotel until my parents returned. And a month later, I'm back. Erica, what are you doing here? It seemed she was surprised by my sudden return, and understandably so. It had been a month since I had been living in a hotel and had not contacted anyone. So my sister and her husband must have assumed I had left for good. But leaving without saying anything is out of the question. Besides, I came back this time to discuss something important. Hey, could you leave quickly? I've decided to sell the house. What are you talking about? A month in a tent and you've finally lost it? The sister and her husband continued to look down on me until the very end. Well, they can enjoy their carefree remarks for now. A few minutes later, they would be pale-faced, but they didn't know that yet. As they smirked at me while I continued speaking. Didn't I tell you this house is mine? Here, I brought the deed and everything, you can check it. I said this as I showed them the land management documents. The two exchanged shocked glances, but it was too early for them to be surprised. Did they think I spent the last month doing nothing but zoning out? If so, they underestimate people too much. Like I said, I intend to sell the house. So, please pack your things and leave. No, no. This is so sudden. And didn't you just buy this house? Yes, but because you keep doing whatever you want, I've decided to sell it. So, leave. You can't just do whatever you want. Realizing I was serious, the two began to panic, but it was already too late. They should deeply regret all the selfish things they've done. As the two fell silent in their panic, I was about to head back to my hotel when, conveniently, my parents returned. Then, like a child running from bullies to their parents for help, my sister ran to my mother, starting to act as if she was the victim. She's saying she's going to sell the house out of nowhere. Don't you think that's crazy? Could you please say something to her? Oh, you've already told them. We're also leaving next week. What? Of course, I had already discussed this with my parents, and they had agreed. So, they weren't surprised at all. In fact, they looked down on my sister and her husband with cold eyes. My sister must have thought that their return would save her, but she was mistaken. What do you mean? We know all about what you did while we were on a trip. Sure, we've been lenient with you, but there's a limit to what we can forgive. You two lied about Erica leaving on her own. We had already decided to kick you out at that point. We were just waiting because Erica had plans. Realizing they were in a tight spot, my sister and her husband started to look nervous. However, it seemed they had no intention of apologizing even now. How rotten can their characters be? Absolutely hopeless. But, what are we supposed to do now? She's pregnant, and you're telling us to leave all of a sudden. Shouldn't you start by apologizing? They haven't even apologized for their actions, and they want us to worry about their future? I wish they wouldn't joke like that. If they've understood their situation, the first thing they should do is apologize. Is it so hard to understand that? It's bizarre to think this is really my sister. I began to wonder if all the good traits from our parents ended up with me. It quickly became a certainty. They stubbornly refused to apologize to me. But I came back home, and I'm pregnant. Why are you kicking me out? It's not fair. Who's being selfish now? It's unbelievable that you would complain while living in someone else's house. And if you're going to complain, just leave. Well, you must be worried about your future since you quit your job. As soon as you found out you could live in such a mansion. I had heard from my parents about my sister and her husband's situation, so I knew everything. It seems my sister had been a housewife since getting married. And upon learning of this house and her pregnancy, her husband quit his job, planning to be taken care of here indefinitely. They must have thought they could mooch off living in such a mansion. I'll give you 1 month to leave. If you don't, I'll have to force you out, just like you did to me. With that, I left the house. Afterwards, my parents managed everything, and within a month, my sister and her husband moved to a place with much cheaper security and key money. However, the place that would rent to jobless people had shared bathrooms and was quite run down. It seems they fight every day about whose fault it is that they ended up this way. But that's none of my concern. My parents are also upset about this whole situation and have decided not to help at all. Even though she is pregnant. But my sister is an adult and should live without burdening our parents anymore. As for me, I decided to rent out that property. I told my sister and her husband that I sold it, but I wouldn't really sell it so soon after buying it. Besides, it was a good investment property to begin with. I found a tenant quickly, so now I have rental income as well. Kicking out my sister and her husband. And increasing my income was killing two birds with one stone. Now, I've moved to a high-rise apartment in downtown with my parents. And we're living happily together. My parents have had enough of my sister and her husband. So I doubt we'll have much to do with them in the future. I want to repay my parents for all they've done for me. But unlike my sister, who forgets favors and repays kindness with spite. People like that don't have a good life waiting for them. No matter what hardships my sister and her husband face in the future, we won't lift a finger to help. It's all the result of their own actions, they've reaped what they sowed. I will continue to live remembering the kindness my parents have shown me.